welcome to this special edition on ILTV. I'm Caleb Ben David. Today is day 734 of the war in Gaza, and officially, at least, it is set to be the last day of the war. In the coming hour, the negotiators from Israel and Hamas in Egypt are set to sign off on the first phase of the U.S.-mediated peace deal presented last week by President Donald Trump, initiating an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. But for most Israelis, the real end of the war will come with the return of the 48 hostages, which is set to begin within 72 hours. Now, the news of let me just give you the schedule coming up. We see here live footage there, live footage in Hostage Square that we're watching, the celebrations there, the American and U.S. flags. Let me give you the schedule. Let me give you the schedule here. Within the next hour, there is expected to be the signing of the agreement. At 3 p.m., the Security Cabinet will get to meet for the approval of the deal within the Security Cabinet. An hour after, at 4 p.m. local time, the full government cabinet is set to meet to approve the deal. Within 24 hours after the approval, the IDF will begin it's with partial withdrawal from Gaza that is specified in the first phase of the deal. Reportedly, 5 IDF divisions in Gaza have already received that approval. And of course, the most important, within 72 hours, the release of the hostages is set to begin, starting with the release of all 20 reportedly alive hostages beginning on Sunday. We are also expecting potentially President Trump to arrive in Israel over the weekend. He has been invited to speak to the Knesset, perhaps on Monday. Also, the Hostage Families Forum inviting him to speak at Hostage Square, perhaps on Sunday. We can see now the react. Let's listen to one of the reactions of the leaders of the Hostage Families Forums to the news of the deal being approved.
I want to thank President Trump for bringing this amazing victory. That's the name for it. That's a victory. He deserves a Nobel Prize for this, a Nobel Peace Prize for bringing this amazing deal. And we're waiting for the next few days to see the hostages actually coming back alive. That'd be, I think, the happiest days that we've had, at least since October 7th.
Now, news of the deal's approval was met by praise across most of the Israeli political spectrum, with Prime Minister Netanyahu calling it, quote, a diplomatic success and a national and moral victory to the state of Israel. But a more mixed response from Ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who will reportedly vote against its approval, and are weighing whether to quit the government. But opposition leaders Elliot and Benny Gantz praised the deal, specifically President Trump's role in making it happen, and say they will provide enough outside support for the government in the Knesset for the agreement to be fulfilled. Well, let's go now, if we can, live to Hostage Square, and our Maayan Hoffman is there. Maayan, are you with us?
I'm with
Maayan,
you.
With a little overcast day in Tel Aviv, but finally some sunshine for all those people there in Hostage Square. What is the scene there today?
Wow, it's a scene of total celebration, almost euphoria, with the idea that these hostages will finally come home. The rain is not a deterrent. People are out with their flags, the songs are playing, and they're waiting with bated breath as we're signing that final deal. The ceasefire goes into effect, and of course, in 72 hours, at least the 20 live hostages will come home. The tears are not tears of pain now from the sky. They are tears of joy, and people are just elated.
Right. Reports of some of the hospitals already preparing to receive the hostages. Social welfare services are gearing up to deal with the families. And people have waited so long for this, Maayan. But clearly, this is going to be a day of celebration, but in some ways a day of an almost traumatic day for Israel that is coming up.
100%. I mean, it's been 734 34 days that these hostages have been in captivity. When you speak of the hospitals, we're talking about Beilinson in Petah Tikva, Sheba Medical Center in Ichilov in Tel Aviv that are preparing. They've been going through briefings and getting ready in order for those hostages to come and get care. We've seen the videos released by Hamas. We are not receiving hostages that are in top shape. These are hostages who have been tortured and abused for 734, 35, 36 days by Monday when they start to come home. And so, of course, these are not going to be healthy people. But the parents, I was listening to the interviews this morning, and soon hopefully we'll be able to bring some to you as well. But you hear one of the fathers said he is so excited, but he almost feels like he's in a dream. He can't believe that it's true. I heard another father say he's been waiting so long. He has so many things to tell his son, but he doesn't know if when he sees him, he will even be able to open his mouth.
Right. And of course, we'll see, of course, celebrations there in Hostage Square. We also may see, Maayan, and I stress it's not been officially confirmed yet, reports of President Trump perhaps flying to Israel over the weekend. The Hostage Families Forum specifically singling out President Trump for praise and saying they would love to see him there in Hostage Square.
100%. First of all, I watched a video this morning of President Trump speaking to the hostage families here in Israel. It brought me to tears, gives you goosebumps. All they were saying was, thank you, President Trump. We love you, President Trump. We believe in you. They also sent a letter to the president, as you said, specifically requesting that if he is flying to the region, and we expect him to arrive on Sunday, potentially to speak to the Knesset, that he will also then speak to the hostage families and be here in Hostage Square. In addition, Witkoff and Kushner are expected to arrive even tonight in Israel to prepare for the release of the hostages.
Right. And of course, they're in Cairo going to be for the signing. We don't know if we're going to get live footage of that. We'll have to see in the coming hour that is supposed to happen. Maayan Hoffman, of course, will be coming back to you later there in Hostage Square.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Maayan. I want to bring on now as guests reserves IDF Major Elliot Chodoff. He's a political military analyst, and Dr. Eyal Pinko, an intelligence, cyber, and security expert. Gentlemen, a momentous day, historic day. Dr. Pinko, I want to start with you. Going into these negotiations, the big question was about Hamas. Are they going to agree to things they've never said in the past they would agree to, decommissioning weapons, ceasefire, stepping down from rule? What do you think, what was the turning points here that Hamas came around to agree, at least on paper, to this deal?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And when you see Hamas, or when, let's say in the last year, Hamas was totally divided. It had the external managing committee leaders, and except of that, 5 different Hamulas, families that were ruling Hamas and fighting with each other. I think, and this is why most of the reasons that no agreement was put on the table and was agreed. I think the real turning point of this deal was the Israeli attack in Qatar on the leadership of Hamas in Qatar. I think this was the turning point of that, because it was very well served Qatar, taking out people that were ruled or controlled by Iran and bringing Qatar to full control of Hamas. And when Hamas was fully controlled by Qatar, the US, Trump, with the aid of the Israeli government, managed to put the things on the table and start squeezing, pressing to go into this peace, or it's not peace, it's a ceasefire negotiation. So I think this was the critical one, and the process that President Trump did with Benjamin Netanyahu after that was the final straw that broke the camel's back.
Right. As you're speaking, we see that's when the news broke of the approval of the deal. You could see rare sight, the Israeli negotiators shaking hands, hugging with the Qatari leaders there. You saw pictures of the Hamas negotiators. We should stress they were not in the same room. That was, but they were mediating in terms of, it was mediating between Israel and Hamas. Certainly Qatar. President Trump also specifically praising Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt as mediators in the deal. Elliot, let's talk about right now, as I said earlier, there are reports that the IDF forces in Gaza have already received orders to start preparing for their withdrawal to that first ceasefire line that has been agreed to, not what was in the Trump maps, so we don't know the exact dimensions of it yet. Let's talk about that. What is going to look like for the next 72 hours for the IDF as it begins to pull back and also prepare, do what it has to prepare for to see the beginning of the release of the hostages?
Well, it also has to prepare for the eventuality of this not going through. Remember, in Yogi Berra's famous words, it ain't over till it's over. There's an agreement that hasn't even begun to be implemented. So they'll have to, the IDF force will have to withdraw. Withdrawal under these circumstances, presuming Hamas doesn't attack, is administrative. It's something that can be done with relative ease. Also, keeping in mind, we're not talking about tremendous distances. It's not a withdrawal, the equivalent of an American withdrawal from Afghanistan. It also has to prepare for, as you said, the receipt of the hostages, but that's something that it's been done before. It's not a terribly complicated thing. What it also needs to prepare for after the withdrawal is what happens the day after, so to speak, when, and I say when, not if, Hamas begins to violate the agreement. And it may not do it on a grand scale. It may not do it October 7th style. But I think that we're going to be seeing more than a few attacks on Israeli positions, deniable, Hamas saying, it's not us, it's them, it's jihad, it's somebody else. But with the purpose of not letting this look like an organized Israeli withdrawal based on an agreement, but rather something that was forced, at least visually for the Hamas people, forced by Hamas attacks.
Let me ask you, let me go further on that, because we don't really understand all the security arrangements that have been made in case that happens. What kind of guarantees there are for Israel, freedom of action, if it feels the agreement is being violated. Are we presuming there are guarantees that have been given, perhaps not even in writing, between, say, the U.S. and Israel, and maybe also on the other side to, I won't say the U.S. and Hamas, but maybe to the U.S. and some of those mediators like Qatar and Turkey that are basically speaking for Hamas in this process?
That is the key question.
Okay.
As we see in Lebanon today, in the aftermath of that ceasefire agreement, Hezbollah immediately began violating virtually all of its terms that it could get away with. And we have taken a zero tolerance approach. It's not 100%. They're rebuilding, but much more slowly than they would have if we weren't intervening. The big question in Gaza, of course, with America deeply involved, Turkey deeply involved, Qatar deeply involved, who is responsible, who will be responsible for making Hamas keep any agreement that it comes to? Now, first of all, let's understand decommissioning weapons is not the same thing as disarming. You decommission a weapon by what? Taking the magazine out and showing that doesn't have a round in the chamber? That's reversible instantaneously. They refuse to give up their weapons, and I think we all know why. When they take it further, when they begin to rebuild, when they begin to bring more weapons in, when attacks begin, who is ultimately responsible for making sure that doesn't happen? And I will say now, if Israel does not have the free reign of responsibility, we're going to find ourselves right back where we started from. I'm not going to predict 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but right back where we started from, just as we saw in Lebanon in the past, and we've seen in Gaza in the past, in the cycles that we've seen since the disengagement in 05.
Right, and Eyal, I want you to weigh on this too because Elliot raises some good questions. Let's not even get to the issue of decommissioning the weapons. There's questions also about the hostages. Reports of Hamas saying they may not know, for example, the location of all of the deceased hostages. Who is overseeing this process, basically, and making sure it's going to happen? It doesn't even look like that framework has even yet been set on the ground. We've talked about multinational force, American supervision. Elliot raises these questions. In your view, how is that going to develop?
I think it's much more complicated because even when you see the border with Egypt, I think Egypt is the biggest winner of this situation. Egypt made itself as like a superpower, controlling the situation. Even the signing ceremony will be in Egypt. So Egypt declared itself or positioned itself as a major player in this game. And as we know, before October 7, Egypt was the major arms supplier to the Gaza Strip. Part of that was its own weaponry, part of was Iranian, but everything was controlled by Sisi's son with the Bedouins family, and they gained a lot of money out of it. And we already saw in the last few days that the IDF identified around 150 drones carrying weapons from Egypt to the Gaza Strip. So this armament of Hamas, it's a nonsense at the end of the day. It's only declaration without any meaning behind that because it's already started to force build up itself. And I think that Hamas will rule the Gaza Strip with the aid of Egypt. And it's enough to hear what Sisi said a few days ago in the ceremony of October 7. He said that we are continuing fighting Israel after the Yom Kippur War from the inside. And he meant that he's fighting Israel from the inside with the Gaza Strip. So also Hamas became a very important proxy player for Egypt.
Right.
So and of course there are some also Turkish interest in that to rebuild Hamas or rebuild Gaza as the profounder or I would say the major player from the Muslim Brotherhood. So I think in this very small territory, there is a huge clash of interests of Iran, Turkey, Egypt, and also, of course, and when you see that it's a clash between the Sunni and the Shia, and it's not only the Israeli-American perspective. So I believe this ground will still be, as Eli said here, it will continue to be a massive battle for the Shia and the Sunni, and we are the victims of this.
Well, before we even go so micro, let's return back to the deal itself,
Okay.
and even the micro. Because when we get that, we have another aspect we haven't talked about, which is when the life hostages are being released. The next day, potentially as early as Monday, we're going to see the release of almost 2,000 Palestinian security prisoners. We don't have the full list of names. Reportedly, that some 250 of them have been convicted of murder, of carrying out terrorist murders. We know that Hamas was making requests for such figures as Marwan Barghouti, the return of the bodies of Mohammed Def and Yahya Sinwar and Elliot. That is, along with the celebration, let's not lose fact, the return of the hostages will be a huge day of celebration for certainly most Israelis. But there's going to be some pain to go along following that with the release of these security prisoners.
Yes, but here I think in the balance, Israel comes out ahead here if indeed all the hostages are released. Remember, we're talking about an organization that already has many thousands of fighters. We captured a bunch of them. Some 1,700 are going to be released that were captured since October 7th. It will certainly be a victory for them. They'll turn it into a victory. It doesn't qualitatively change Hamas's capability. What I'm looking at is an additional question, that is, will Hamas actually go through with their exchange, or are they going to be playing games along the way? You know, Hamas promise. We saw what happened with the Bibas family. Where are they going to turn around and say, well, we can't find this one, we can't release that one, and drag this out so much longer? So today, I don't want to rain on the parade, but
Sure.
you know, today we're celebrating the agreement, and that's fine. And I'm with it. I'm 100%. As I said earlier, we should really be celebrating after these people. I'm talking about Hamas, who are notorious in not keeping agreements, in violating them before they've even gone into implementation. Let's see what happens there. As far as the release of prisoners, as I said, I think it's significant. But as long as Barghouti, Saadat, and the likes of them, and the Nukhba terrorists of October 7th are not being released, then we're coming out way ahead on this deal.
Eyal, I want to talk about the role of President Trump here. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Camp David Accords and President Carter. Really, I don't think since that time you've seen an American president be so personally involved in peacemaking and making a deal and in being part of this overall process moving forward, because President Trump has really invested everything in this. So let's talk a little about his involvement, not only in making this deal, but we know reports he may even be coming to Israel, speaking to the Knesset, and then, of course, his plans for all of this moving forward, because it is part of his larger sort of vision. In a way, maybe this is the deal of the century that he was talking about.
Yeah, I cannot forget the case of President Obama that was declaring of a peace, and because of this declaration, he got the Nobel Prize. In a totally different case, but absolutely, you saw his deeply involvement of himself and his governmental aides and all. And I think if you read and listen to what Trump says, Trump sees in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, he sees as autonomy, a U.S. autonomy over there. And I think that if you look on a broader aspect of Trump, it's not only to gain the Prize Nobel, it's not only to bring peace to the Middle East, but it's also really the what is behind the scene is to build a sustainable autonomy in the northern part of Gaza, U.S. autonomy that can compete to be part of the Abraham Accords in order to compete the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So I think this is economical driven process. Trump looks in a very further away steps, speaking about a merchant, a commerce way that will go from India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, to the U.S. autonomy in the south, in the northern part of Gaza. And I think that this is something that we will see. He speaks about it a lot. And I think that this will be the next steps that we'll see here. And I think this is part of his also not only belief in the process, not only being a huge supporter of Israel and trying to bring the hostages back. I think he really believes in that, but it's also part, I think, of a canonical vision.
All right, certainly. We should note, ironically, the Nobel Peace Prize for this past year is scheduled to be announced tomorrow in Sweden. Of course, that was decided weeks ago, so presumably it is not President Trump, but maybe they should be giving him a special mention. He certainly deserves it. Gentlemen, stay with us.
I think we'll be surprised tomorrow.
Well, maybe. We'll
Could
see.
be.
Gentlemen, stay with us. I'm sorry. Yes, okay. We're going to just stay. Okay, sorry. We were about to go to Hostage Square. We hopefully will bring you that shortly. Elliot, I want to just talk about moving forward with the security challenges, if indeed now. I know you're rightly raising some sort of pessimistic concerns, which are certainly correct, given what. I'm sorry. Can we go now to Hostage Square? Gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to go live to our Maayan Hoffman in Hostage Square. Maayan, are you with us?
I'm with you, yes.
And who do you have with you?
I have with me Idit. She's somebody who has been protesting every night, waiting to get the hostages home. Welcome, Idit.
Hi, good morning. This is a very exciting morning, afternoon, almost noon. I feel a sense of relief, although it's like a cautious optimism, because we're always saying that it's not over until we see the final hostage coming home. And I want to thank President Trump for intervening, because I think that if it were up to the Israeli government, the whole situation would still be dragged along as it has been for the past 2 years. It should have been seized a lot sooner. And I think if it weren't for Trump, we would still be in this horrific situation.
Now, Idit, I want to ask you, you have been protesting every single night, and now it feels like maybe, God willing, within 72 hours, our hostages are going to be transferred to Israel. Describe to me the euphoria, the feeling of knowing that this could actually be coming to fruition.
Wow. It's like, it's something that we've been praying for and imagining actually for so long, from the last deal, which was on January, I think. So I'm thinking, I just want to see the hugs. I want to see the hugs. I want to see the sons coming back to their mothers and fathers. I want to see the fathers holding their small children. I want to see, husbands and wives reunite. And I also want to see families who will now get their closure. It's a very big issue in Judaism and in the Israeli society to bring someone to proper burial, to let him rest in peace. And we need that to happen. We need the living to come to rehabilitation, and we need the dead to be properly buried.
Idit, thank you so much for your sentiments today. Thank you. Amazing. So many people are speaking just like Idit today. So excited. The euphoria is so incredible here. You should see more and more people flooding in since we last spoke.
Right, and I could see that. I don't know, usually the only time I see Hostage Square crowded like that in recent years is during the time of the protests, usually in the evening. I don't know how I've seen it so crowded during the day. And it does look like the clouds are breaking up a bit, Maayan. It looks like it's getting a little sunnier out there.
Yes.
And we're seeing U.S. flags there as well. Maayan Hoffman, thank you. We'll come back to you, of course, later in the program there all day at Hostage Square. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to go back to our guests, Elliot Chodoff and Dr. Eyal Pinko. Gentlemen, Elliot, I'll start with you. There is something we should touch on, which is this has been an extremely painful period for Israel, not just in terms of the fate of the hostages, but sort of internal divisions over how the best way to get them back has led to some sort of political discord and, of course, the heavy burden. You heard the guest there. I don't know if you heard there speaking from Hostage Square about maybe this being the beginning, if we're assuming that it does go well, at least in the first phase, of a period of sort of national reconciliation and healing. I just want to get your thoughts on that, and you too, Eyal, on how you feel about whether that actually that's something we're going to be able to see happen in the coming weeks and months, if indeed, at the very least, the first phase of the deal comes off successfully.
The political discord predates October 7th, and we're seeing echoes of it to this day. And honestly, October 7th was certainly a monumental failure on the part of the Israeli leadership, military and political. But I would say that the discord has been more marginalized in the past 2 years in juxtaposition to the unity of fighting the war. In other words, there can be a great deal of dispute, and I certainly don't agree with many of the policies, strategic and otherwise, that were implemented over the past 2 years of fighting. But there's a general sense, and I think part of this also has to do with long reserve service, and suddenly Israelis who haven't seen each other or been close to each other in many, many years find themselves as we would say eating out of the same mess tin for months and months on end. And I think that mitigated a great deal of the polarization, not the debate, not the argument, but the social discord on that level. Now, that doesn't mean that sort of at the tail ends of the curve, we don't have vocal extreme opposition toward the center, and from both sides. But I think it's in a different place. That discord is not going away. If anything, it might actually intensify as we move now into an election season. And if the fighting doesn't continue, then more and more attention and effort will be shifted into domestic politics. So I'm predicting the opposite of that. In other words, increased discord, not decreased.
Eyal, I want to get your opinion on that. And I do agree, certainly, that we had this intense political debate, specifically about the government's judicial reform program prior to the war. But certainly the issue of the hostages, where we're talking about really the fate of individuals, life or death issues for specific individuals, did add another element to that. And obviously, Elliot's correct that technically, certainly, we're going to be coming into an election year. We don't know exactly when, next year sometime. But how do you feel about the fact that at least that debate will move more within the political parameters as opposed to some of what we've seen over the past, certainly 2 years?
Yeah, I think that the lady that Maayan was interviewed, I think she reflected many of the things that are buzzing all over, which is saying that Trump brought the hostages and nothing concerning the government. And I do believe that this government did very bad October 7 and before October 7. And I'm not a big supporter of this government, but without the mutual move of the prime minister and the president, the US and the Israeli one, nothing could have happened. So I do believe this is a common effort, and without the Israeli military maneuver that was being conducted in the last 4 or 5 months, nothing could have happened. So I think that this reflects what part of the public thinking and what it's the reality, I believe, of what brought the hostages back or will bring, we hope so, in the next 72 hours. And so I believe because of just in a life example, it's showing that the discord will be much, much worse. I think we're going to face the next year as a very complex year with a lot of clashes inside society. And until the upcoming election, whenever it will be, I think we're going to be, we have also the issue, for example, the Orthodox Jews, if Arabs will go to have some kind of, the Israeli Arabs will go to have some kind of also, a citizen mandatory service. There's a lot of clashes between the society, and the hostages return will only increase it, I believe.
Okay, well, we should say, though, as I said before, these are issues that have been in Israeli political society for many years, if not decades, and at least we will not be discussing an issue that deals with the fate of the specific life or death decisions for example, the hostages. Gentlemen, I want to bring in also the former IDF spokesman, now a senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Jonathan Conricus, in the discussion. Jonathan, I just want to, first of all, get your reaction to the news of the deal. A lot of people in the last couple of days were skeptical, especially whether Hamas would come around to this point, and I just want to get your immediate reaction to the news that the deal is, I believe at this hour now, we don't have any live pictures, but being signed off on in Cairo.
Yeah, it's in my mind, it is a victory for freedom. It's a victory for Israel. It is a victory that has been brought by President Trump. I think tremendous credit to President Trump and his team for even getting us this far. And we are still ahead of all of the major stumbling blocks. We still have very hard nuts to crack. But as we are now, where there appears to be Hamas approval, and they're signing on that they're going to release all of the live hostages and then probably all or most of the dead hostages, that is a major step forward that would bring us closer to achieving our goals, Israeli goals. It'll be much better for stability, and the chances of ending the war in a relatively positive way are pretty high. And all of that, most of it is thanks to Israel's ability to fight and persevere and withstand international pressure, Israel's ability to achieve and shape military reality on the ground. But none of this would have been enough had it not been for the election of President Trump and for him personally investing his political, personal, presidential credit on this matter and really digging into the matter here with the talented team. So today, for the first time in a very long time, I'm slightly hopeful that we will actually see our brothers and sisters back from Hamas captivity. And of course, we'll have to brazen ourselves for future very tough and protracted negotiations where Hamas and their partners will try to bob and weave and try to deflect and not to implement what they are committed to. But at this time, this day, this is a positive moment for the first time in 2 or so years.
Right, and I just want to raise up an issue, I don't know if it's raising an issue or a caveat by our other guests about, as you said before, they're also anticipating reasonably violations by Hamas, starting with the release of the hostages, and we see them play games with that before, potential attacks on the IDF forces that will be remaining inside Gaza, even though in new withdrawal lines. The issue of how free Israel will be to respond to those. What guarantees there are for Israel to have the freedom of action if, in fact, we see these kind of violations by Hamas, especially because we're now talking about potentially the introduction of other forces or other outside actors or players coming into the Gaza Strip.
Yes, definitely. And that is one of the major issues and stumbling blocks because Israeli forces will be deployed inside the Gaza Strip. Currently, they have not moved and they're not supposed to move until there is significant developments in terms of return of hostages. Overflights will continue. And we know from past experience that we should anticipate and be ready for Hamas to conduct attacks on the ground. We should anticipate that Hamas will cut us short in terms of the amount of hostages, live and murdered ones, that they will return. We should anticipate that they will lie about the fact that or allegedly that they cannot get to all of the murdered hostages, and they will try that as an excuse in order to keep those cards, that leverage with Hamas. But I think all of that is known, and the Israeli negotiation teams headed by Minister Dermer, but with the very direct involvement of Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think are aware of that, and we are bracing ourselves for it. And the most important part is that has been communicated and agreed upon with the Americans ahead of time, that if this happens, then this is the Israeli response. If Hamas does X, we are entitled to do Y. If Hamas does something else, then we are entitled to do something else, and that there's an escalatory retribution here, which Hamas and the Qataris and the Egyptians are aware of, so that the tariffs are known. If you violate, then these are the responses that Israel will be within its rights and within its bounds to do. And I'm pretty sure that these things have been or are being hashed out with the Americans, so that we won't leave that leverage in the hands of Hamas and the Qataris, and that they won't be the ones dictating events, but that Israel and the US will be the ones that really are holding the reins here and control the situation.
Our other guests, do we still have Elliot Chodoff with us? No, okay, they're gone.
Yes.
I do. Oh, yeah, Elliot, you are still here. Okay. I just want to go back to, well, all three of you are definitely and giving due praise to President Trump for playing a key role here. Eyal did point out that Prime Minister Netanyahu and some of the decisions he's made led to this moment by Hamas. And of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu approved the deal, which does achieve some of the aims, the war aims he set out, the disarming or decommissioning of Hamas. It's removing it from power. But I want to ask you, there are some aspects in this agreement further down the road that definitely contradict Prime Minister Netanyahu's vision for the future of Gaza, particularly potential role for the Palestinian Authority, for example, a reformed Palestinian Authority. So what brought him to this point, to agree to this deal, despite the fact that there are some aspects of it that are problematic for him, I would say both practically and ideologically as well?
Well, first of all, typical of any political leader, particularly in a democracy, kicking the can down the road is part of political strategy. Getting the hostages out is now. Dealing with the other problem will be whenever it is further down the road. I think that at the same time, these are things that are open to negotiation. And as we said earlier, and Jonathan repeated, the key question is going to be how much power and authority Israel retains in terms of responding to violations into the future. I think we should also consider something else, with all the proper and due respect to President Trump's pressure, because I think pressure on Turkey and Qatar in particular to bring Hamas to heel. I think we should also keep in mind that one of the things that is also driving Turkey and Qatar is the fact that they care more about Hamas's survival than Hamas does. The Hamas leadership in Gaza was willing to go down as martyrs, as shahidim, and Qatar and Turkey and Egypt all have, for their own different interests, have an interest in a Hamas operating in Gaza. So I think they put the screws to them as well, in part to maintain them into the future. Had this fighting continued in the direction that it was going, there wasn't going to be much of a Hamas left in another month or two or three. So the breathing space in here is critical. And once again, the ability, if Israel can maintain in an agreement the ability to respond sharply, violently to Hamas violations, that'll have an enormous impact into the future. But again, time will tell.
We'll make a point there. Jonathan Conricus, are you still with us? Okay.
Lay on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I think if we're honest here, I think what President Trump was able to identify and then leverage in terms of his ability to get Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, to the negotiations table was the fact that sadly, the state of Israel under Prime Minister Netanyahu has been pretty much isolated diplomatically. And there's kind of a mirror image of military success on one hand, regionally speaking, against Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and against Hamas and many others, and against the Houthis. There's been relative military success, but at the diplomatic and international political level, Israel under Prime Minister Netanyahu is at its lowest point that I remember in my short life, and maybe others will remember even longer time spans. And I think President Trump understood that this is a time where Israel is very much reliant on the good graces and the policy of the United States of America. And as such, when the American president brings forward a deal that is definitely good enough for Israel, to say the least, then there is a strong political framework here that will allow Israel to advance and to go forward and to agree to these terms. So I think that's one key part. But I think really the brilliance here has been to get Arab and Muslim countries on board. That's a tremendous success of the Trump team. And I'm also very happy that President Trump is leading international issues with regards to the Middle East, and it's not President Macron of France or the Saudis. And I think that is also a major achievement by President Trump. He's basically overtaken. He's in the lead. He's in the driving seat, and he is the one who has brought this coalition together. And the French so-called initiative of forcing a Palestinian state and unconditional forcing of a Palestinian state, that is not the main track, and I don't think it's going to be, because with the release of hostages and hopefully with the positive traction that we will see, front and center will be President Trump's peace agreement and ceasefire first, and then hopefully a broader regional peace. And I think that's very important, and Israel should be pretty thankful for it. I regret that we have to find ourselves in a kind of isolated place to begin with, but that's perhaps a topic for another discussion, how we got there and why we got there and what we need to do in order to get out of it.
Right, and Eyal, Jonathan is talking about potentially, for example, extending the Abraham Accords. But Dr. Pinko, I want to ask you though about the role of some of these countries that have played key roles in the mediating agreement and may play key roles. Of course, Israel would love that this would lead to some kind of warming of relations with the Saudis, paving that way there, and extending the Abraham Accords. But specifically, two countries that President Trump singled out here, Qatar and Turkey, in bringing this agreement and maybe playing a key role in moving forward. How do you see that, especially Qatar, which has been so problematic for Israel over the years?
I think it's a very critical question. I believe that Qatar and Turkey are much worse enemies to Israel than Iran, because you can see during the years what they did, arming Hamas. By the way, it's not only Qatar that supported Hamas and gave money; it's also Turkey as well and Iran as well. Even everybody speaks about the Qatarian gate. And looking on the long term or the strategy of Qatar and Turkey, they are all in order to take the Israeli state out. And I do believe that it's a very controversial a play made by Qatar. From one side, they want to show the world that they are amazing country. They contributed to the peace. They were part of negotiation. They put everything in order to bring the ceasefire. But on the other side, they managed Hamas for many years. They supported them, sponsored, and now they will have much more control over them in the Gaza Strip, and they will not stop of funding Hamas. On the contrary, so I do believe that we are in a very sensitive situation over here. And we say in the warfare strategy studies that the political moves are the continuous of the war, and the war is the continuous of the political moves. So I think we are now, when hopefully the ceasefire will come, we will need to see what will be the next political moves. And there are huge players that are over here playing in this small piece of land. The Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turkish, Qatarian, Iranian, of course, the US. So let's see what we call it, the mishmash. Let's see what this mishmash will bring with it. I think we are going to face a very interesting year ahead of us.
Yeah, Israel has not had great success with international forces or relying on Arab neighbors for security, but we'll have to see. Dr. Eyal Pinko, I understand
you said it very gently, absolutely.
Yeah, I understand you have to leave us. Thank you for joining. Jonathan, Elliot, if you could stay with us, but I do want to see if we can go back to our Maayan Hoffman, who is there today in Hostage Square. And Maayan, again, you see the scene there, how crowded it is, people coming out, wanting to be a part of this. Certainly, if we're going to see the release of the 20 hostages, even though we know some of them are not in great condition, it's going to be a tremendous cause for celebration. But there'll be some pain with the return of the hostages that are no longer with us. could be compounded by some complications there. Our guests have raised the possibility of Hamas playing games. Unfortunately, we have one example of the Bibas family, the Bibas children. So this could also be just a very challenging day if, for example, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we start seeing the release of those hostages.
100%. I mean, certainly we've already heard from Hamas that they are telling us that at least 9 of the hostages they can't locate. We don't know whether that's true or false. There are is sentiment that there will be some international force that will go in and help to locate those hostages. We don't know yet, what the names are of the 9 that are purportedly missing. Moreover, you have to remember that these hostages, as you said, are not in great shape. We're going to find out the true depth of the health ailments that are impacting the hostages when we see them come across, hopefully, the border into Israel. And Kalev, I just want to make sure with all the drumming, it's okay and you can hear me, because it is quite loud here at Hostage Square. But we are going to, okay, great. We are definitely going to, be seeing the hostages very ill. As we mentioned before, Valence in Hospital, Sheba, and Eyal are all preparing for their return. Moreover, I mean, the country has been in a state of national trauma. And we also have to recognize that what has been holding us off, that has been keeping us going, is the fight to get the hostages home. But when they return home, we will need a chance as a collective, as a country, to really start that mourning process and to deal with the trauma that we have experienced over the last 2 years. I also want to point out something that we haven't said. We just passed October 7th, but we didn't pass Simchat Torah. And I want to remind you that Simchat Torah is Monday night to Tuesday, which means that 2 years from the Jewish calendar is exactly when these live hostages are expected to come home.
It's a good point, Maayan, because many people, I recall on the first anniversary, Simchat Torah, for those who don't know, is considered one of the most joyous of Jewish festivals. There's singing, there's dancing, and many people wondered if that would be tainted, not only just even last year, but permanently, by the fact that it also on the Jewish calendar marks the October 7th attack. But how, I won't say ironic, but almost as we say in Yiddish, beshert, fated, perhaps, that we'll have something to be celebrate on Simchat Torah with the return of the hostages, Maayan. It's quite remarkable.
And it's remarkable, and it is almost a redeeming of the holiday, because Simchat Torah obviously has not been the same in this country, clearly not on October 7th, 2023, and even last year, as we were still mourning so many hostages and so much loss of life and the ongoing war. And this year on Erev, on the eve of Simchat Torah, that Monday, to be able to see those hostages come home will hopefully be the start of a positive and joyful time and an ability for us to celebrate Simchat Torah this year.
It certainly is, and I hope truly, fingers crossed, that we will have true reason and joy to celebrate on Simchat Torah. Maayan Hoffman, of course, ILTV will be coming back to there in Hostage Square. I do want to now shift location from Tel Aviv and, if we can, to Jerusalem. Our correspondent, India Naftali, is there in the capital. And, of course, India, celebration, just outright celebration in Tel Aviv. But, there's a political reality here that's going to be taking place in Jerusalem, in the Prime Minister's office, in the cabinet, and in the Knesset. It's a little more complicated. So walk us through what we're going to be seeing later today in terms of the political developments following the news of the signing of the hostage deal, of the hostage Gaza ceasefire. Now we're having some audio. Okay, we'll have to go back. We'll have to go back to India there. So I want to go back to our guests, Jonathan Conricus, and Elliot Chodoff. And I
think
Jonathan,
she's unmuted now. I think
is that right? Do we have India? Can we go back to India? Good.
Live from Jerusalem.
All right, India. So again, walk us through, as I said, some of the political developments that are going to have to happen there in Jerusalem in order for this deal to get approved.
Sure. As we speak right now, here in Jerusalem in the Knesset, there are deliberations in the cabinet over this first part of the ceasefire deal. Now, it is expected to pass, but not without opposition. And in fact, opposition from Prime Minister Netanyahu's own majority coalition himself. So we're seeing leaders like Ben Gvir and Smotrich who are pushing back against this, while we have leaders in the minority coalition who are supporting it. So it would be quite unfortunate if this deal didn't go through, and a huge disappointment if for Trump, if the government were to fall apart. Ben Gvir has threatened to walk from the government over. And so what we're seeing now is we need to see Netanyahu really play his cards right to make sure that not just that this phase passes, but also going forward that he will maintain support of the government. Surely President Trump would find it as a huge disappointment if it would throw the whole entire ceasefire 20-point Trump plan into complete calamity. So right now the stakes are high for Netanyahu. We are really hoping, and especially Trump is betting on Netanyahu. Trump is coming to Israel now, and he's expected to be here in Jerusalem, and even he's offered to speak in the Knesset. As far as I know, be the first time that President Trump would be in the Knesset, and stakes are high, Kalev.
All right. In the Naftali there in Jerusalem, thank you for that. Let me go back to our guests. Jonathan, there are reports of, I don't know, I thought the ceasefire was supposed to start with the signing of agreement. We don't have final word on that. There are reports of tank fire taking place. I have that unconfirmed. It's not from Sahel, but it's from some of the social media accounts that follow it, of tank fire in various locations there in the Gaza Strip. So it looks like we are seeing perhaps the sort of last effort to take action, or perhaps we're perhaps already seeing some of these violations that you and Elliot were warning about by Hamas and, of course, some of the other terror groups there in Gaza.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, it's a tail activity. I'm not entirely sure that everybody in Hamas, to the last terrorist, are up to speed about events, and it'll usually take some time before every part of a fighting organization on the ground gets, updated, and we can, really bring in a ceasefire. And things are happening pretty quickly. I think we should anticipate tank fire, machine gun fire. We should anticipate overflights, and we should anticipate a very vigilant IDF stance on the ground and in the air and at sea and intel-wise, because we know that Hamas would very much, I think, like to embarrass Israel. A prime target would be, of course, to try to abduct Israeli soldiers. Given the amount of diplomatic pressure on Hamas and how much the Qataris, the Turks, and the Egyptians are now focusing on Hamas, I think that the likelihood is not high that Hamas will try something major, a major operation, but definitely minor incursions, definitely attempts at sniper attacks, perhaps IEDs, that kind of things, in order to try to destabilize the IDF and score some cheap points. I would, however, like to zoom out for a second and address the big picture here. And I follow on to what we've been discussing here of this significant diplomatic achievement that President Trump and his team has been able to. My biggest worry is that the price that has been paid or will be paid by the US is a strategic one. And I think that the Turks, the Qataris, and the Egyptians, all three of them who have been very important and instrumental in applying pressure on Hamas, they are asking for strategic, game-changing weapon systems made in the US that they want in their arsenal. And that is a room for concern, because on one side of it, Israel gets back our hostages, which is very, very important. We get, hopefully, an end to the war at favorable conditions, but we may face strategic nation-state enemies, Turkey and Egypt, the ones that come to mind. Yes, we have a peace treaty with Egypt, but Egypt has a very large military, about 1.5 times the size of the IDF, and it is not positively posture towards Israel. It is hostile towards Israel. And the fact that these countries are now in the good graces and favors of the US president, and they want the F-35, they want the advanced versions of the F-16s, and they want additional platforms. Those could be regional strategic game changers, and that is room for concern. I hope that is not a done deal, but knowing and looking at how this president does diplomacy and does deals, I fear that is reality. And if it is, that is not a positive one for the future, and that is strategic. That is not something small that we can brush aside and say that our brave pilots will take care of it.
All right. Certainly that is going to be a cause for concern strategically for Israel moving forward. And of course, it's going to have to contend with the fallout from that. Jonathan Conricus, thank you. I know you have to go. Thank you for joining us for this special edition on ILTV. Elliot Chodoff still with us. Jonathan was talking about Hamas there, Elliot. By the way, we just have an announcement from Hamas to the signing of the agreement. Of course, it's not unexpected. Hamas, in an official statement, or a senior figure in Hamas, claiming this is a victory for Hamas and saying Gaza has triumphed through its unity to overcome the will of their enemies. So this is Hamas. Of course, we know that Hamas is going to try to spin this as positively as they are. Where do you see the state of Hamas? Certainly the IDF has dealt it a huge blow, has basically rendered it kind of degraded its military to the point where it's certainly not able to perhaps maintain the control over Gaza that it had, but not the perhaps total victory that, for example, Prime Minister Netanyahu, some other people in the government spoke about or would have liked to have seen.
The declaration of victory is not completely a fantasy. Let's understand and adding to what Jonathan just talked about, the strategic dangers of supplying strategic weapons to Qatar and Turkey and Egypt. These are consequences, along with the Hamas victory declaration, consequences of the failure of October 7th and the failure to win the war in Gaza. I mean, on the one hand, tactically, we can look at tremendous successes on the part of the IDF in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran, and in other places. But these are tactical successes. In the end, Hamas is still standing. And in a counterinsurgency, counter-guerrilla war, if the enemy is still standing, he can legitimately declare a victory. Now, granted, it's not a World War II style victory, but for them it is. They're still there. They're still armed. They're still organized. I think one of the things that we'll be seeing over the next days is they're beginning to eliminate opposition in Gaza. The tribal groups that have opposed them, I think, are in tremendous danger, and they've made it very clear that they're going to go after them to solidify their position. So here again, the next week or two are going to be critical in how much leeway Hamas will be given to do whatever it wants. And once they gain some of it, in other words, with taking out some of their enemies there, rearming, rebuilding positions, sniping at the IDF, possibly attempting for sure, hopefully not succeeding in grabbing an IDF soldier, alive or dead. How the world responds, and more particularly how Israel responds and how the world responds to the Israeli response, are really going to be the litmus tests of what we're going to be seeing over the months ahead.
Israel will be facing there in the months ahead. Elliot Chodoff, I want to thank you for joining us on ILTV. I want to see if we can go back to our Hoffman. Let's bring this back, of course, to the there at Hostage Square. And Maayan, I think of as a journalist who's been covering this for the past couple of years, getting to know some of the hostage families quite well, figures, and even those that didn't, the people the public has known, the Chen family, the Gilboa Dalal family, the Zangalka family. How much of this is going to be potentially a sort of a closing of a circle? In a sense, of course, for those families, they have still so much they're going to have to struggle with in terms of the returns of their loved ones. But for so many of us, this is going to be at least the beginning of closing that circle that opened up, or that wound that opened up on October 7th. And I just want to get your thoughts on that as someone who also has been covering this really now since the beginning of this war.
Yeah, Kalev, it's such a good question what you asked. You know, just on October 7th itself, I actually went down to a lot of those border communities and visited the kibbutzim. And while there was life back and people had returned and there was a feeling of strength and resilience, on that day, a couple of days ago, there was this feeling of heaviness because there was this understanding that the hostages were still not home and the war was not over. And as you see today at Hostage Square, and certainly we'll see for these families, for journalists like you and me who've gotten to know them, this is a closing of the circle. Now, obviously, there is a new road ahead, as you mentioned. The war will end, but the trauma in the country, the recovery and the rehabilitation of these hostages, the burial of the dead hostages is certainly not going to be over on Monday. We'll never be able to forget October 7th. But at the same time, that weight of knowing that 48 Israelis are in the grips of Hamas will go away.
Right. You know, I went down a year ago to the site of the Nova Music Festival with Gil Gilboa Dalal. His brother Guy has been one of the hostages there. You know, you hear his story. You get to know, it gets quite emotional about the impact of it. And I think for this, we've been discussing a lot of the bigger issues here involved in this hostage deal, some painful concessions that Israel has had to make. But certainly, a final word from you that for many Israelis, and the polls have shown Israelis want this deal to go through, they're not focusing on a lot of the details we've been speaking about, but really on the return of those hostages, the living ones, and also those that have passed, so that at least for those families, they can begin to mourn properly.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I think that, as you said, the polls are showing that the majority, 3/4 of Israelis would do anything to bring those hostages home, even over finishing up the war with Hamas. But I think the sentiment here has to be that we have a reason to celebrate. This is an incredible, incredible moment for the state of Israel. And at the same time, this is only phase one. Israel might be pulling back to 53%, but we are not leaving Gaza. We are not going to leave Hamas in power. And in fact, we will still continue through these phases to ensure that Hamas and the Gaza Strip is de-armed. So it is a cause for celebration because we are bringing the hostages home. It does not mean the war is over. And I think it is important to remember that.
Right. Just stay with us a bit, Maayan. We are, just want to go over, just to remind our viewers, this is a special edition. We're going to be covering developments there throughout the day, getting the latest news there out of Cairo. Now, as you can see, the final signing was to begin. We don't have any live pictures of that, but I presume that we're going to be getting some sort of coverage from that from the international news agencies that are down there in Gaza. At 3 p.m. local time, in Israel time, the Security Cabinet is set to meet. And of course, they're going to be briefed on some of the details there, and there will be a vote in the Security Cabinet. Prime Minister Netanyahu is certainly going to have majority support there. At 4 p.m., the full cabinet is going to be meeting, or scheduled to meet in Jerusalem. Again, there we do expect some opposition. Our reporting to Naftali has said that Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, two key ministers in Prime Minister Netanyahu's government, has said they will likely oppose the deal, but it does appear as if Prime Minister Netanyahu will have a majority in the cabinet, and even if those ministers pull their respective parties out of the coalition, the opposition parties, Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid and Benny Gantz's party, has said they will provide, at least for the time being, enough of a security cushion in the Knesset to maintain the government after the agreement within 24 hours. So we are talking about now, in the next 24 hours from now, the IDF is going to begin to pull back. There are currently 5 divisions of the IDF in the Gaza Strip. And they have reportedly received already orders to pull back, though we do have reports just in the last few minutes that they have been engaging in some kind of military activity. This is to be expected going into that. And of course, the key, within 72 hours of now, the release of the 20, certainly the release of the 20 expected living hostages is to begin. And that will be followed by, of course, beginning the process of recovering the bodies and remains of the remaining hostages. Israel will also begin at that point to start releasing Palestinian security prisoners. I want to thank everybody who's been watching for joining us. Of course, you could continue to go on our app, scan that QR code, and stay tuned with ILTV throughout the day as we cover this historic day, the end of the Gaza deal. Thanks for joining.